So Ray, we're here at VMworld 2018 in EMEA, 10th VMworld over here.
Yep.
We're famous for innovation, right? And we keep getting challenged. You and I have been challenged in the last couple of days by the press around what are we doing around innovation.
Yep.
We've revealed some innovative things in the keynotes, but what are we doing around innovation in EMEA? How do you see that?
So as you've said, we've got a reputation for innovation, and in fact, several of the customers come up and ask about what do we do to build an innovation culture. So it's the news is getting out there in some way, right? Specifically in EMEA, I mean, actually quite often when I talk to customers, they're a little bit surprised to find out that we've such a significant R&D presence in EMEA, over in Sofia in Bulgaria. And you know, when we talk about that, our office in Sofia must be 11 years old at this stage, something like that.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So it's been a key part of many of the products that we produce, where we focus on, where they focus on in terms of across all of our product line at this stage. So there's been a lot of raw innovations coming from there. But often the question is around the culture that it takes to drive innovation.
Yeah.
And over again, my answer to that is one of, you better be prepared to deal with change, and you better be prepared to promote that change, right? And when I look at what's happening in our team in Sofia, you know, think about it. We bought a company which was a consulting company, relatively small at the time.
Yeah.
And over the last 10 years, we've put in so many new products in there. We've asked them to generate all sorts of new technologies. They've been heavily involved in terms of working what happens on the field side of things, going out, prototypes, doing POCs and so on. So I think it's a good example of how our culture of innovation is able to work in EMEA.
And it's been a big deal for Bulgaria and Sofia itself.
Correct,
We're you know, a major employer there now. I know when I've been there, I've got to meet the president, etc. Just because you know it's VMware, and we're big for what's going on there as they see themselves as kind of, you know, the powerhouse of tech in Eastern Europe.
I met somebody from the press a few moments ago, met me, and I didn't realize he was from Bulgaria, and I was talking about Sofia, and he basically says, "Well, what do you mean? You guys started the tech business in Sofia?"
I know, it's amazing.
What? Okay.
So I mean, innovation sometimes is about going to different places and finding new people and diversity. And in fact, we did some research on the innovation gap earlier this year. And one of the things that really came out of that was there is a chasm in a lot of organizations between ideas and action. So can you talk a little bit about how we at VMware cross that chasm, I suppose, of ideas and action?
So there's two, when you think of innovation, part of it is to generate those ideas. You need to constantly be able to generate those ideas. Then there's two things, and one of which may be surprising, is some of the ideas will fail. They'll go nowhere, right? But you actually need to be prepared to deal with that and say, okay, you know, that one's not working out. Now your worst case is if you keep one of those failing ideas and continue to drive at it forever. So you're kind of like, you know, well, I was going to use an example I probably shouldn't use.
Be careful. We can all think of certain companies and technologies, I think, that have done that. Yeah.
But the other challenge is when you get that idea and it begins to feel like something is real, now how do you actually execute against it? And you tend to see a pattern. The idea is really good, people like it, you're beginning to make some noise about it, and then it hits the wall of reality. I don't have revenue right now. This is hard to be able to get out the door. And, you know, the one that actually comes in my mind, which might surprise some people, is vSAN, right? The technology behind vSAN, the idea behind vSAN was bubbling in VMware for a very long time. And then the market just became right. You know, we got the right talent on board. Christos in particular began to push this very, very aggressively. And so it was able to go through that chasm or that difficulty of just getting through that first phase. And once it got out there, it started showing enormous success. But you have to have I guess I would say the relentless drive to be able to drive it through.
I was going to say drive's the real thing, because I know I've been involved in some of the stuff we've been doing in Edge over the last 2 or 3 years, and you know that starts with you and I having meetings with Sainsbury's right here, sort of 3 years ago, talking about, you know, the potential of what changes their stores, and to have to drive an idea you had 3 years ago. What I'm finding isn't what comes out the end of the production line. I think that's so don't get stuck in what you think it's going to become. It can change massively, and I think you know, enabling an environment that we do at VMware where people can innovate and we allow change and allow failure. I mean, allowing failure is a bit of a cliche. You know, everyone says, oh, you've got to allow failure, but I think it is actually around having a culture of allowing that's really important.
Yeah, in fact, when you speak of that sense of what you start, what the idea is might not be what you actually ship in the end. You know, I've been involved in quite a few startups, and I watch startups all the time, and they pivot all the time. But we too need to pivot all the time, and we do pivot all the time. But it exactly means that you have to have that drive that says, okay, I thought I was going in this direction, but I'm actually a little bit off, and you need to be able to adjust to that. and the product that comes out at the end, it'll be related to what you started with, but might be quite different in terms of what that final executed product looks like.
I know, and sometimes you've got to take a gamble as an organization, especially around acquisitions. You know, you look at acquisition with Heptio. Yes, we've acquired a company there with a lot of people, but no real revenue and a whole bunch of open source stuff. But as Pat reminded me, if you think back to when we acquired Nicira for $1.2 billion for a company that was turning over about 10 million, that was just as much of a gamble, right?
Correct.
You have to do that too.
Yeah, that question comes up several times from the press here, because we just announced the intent of acquiring Heptio. And so their question was, well, what does this mean? Actually, one of the questions was, is this how you're going to innovate in the future, by acquiring companies? And my answer to that was, what do you mean? We always do this. We do both of these things. We innovate organically and we innovate by making acquisitions. And Nicira comes up as that exact same example. If we can repeat what we did with Nicira, the ability to be able to take this really good idea, this fledgling product, and be able to then leverage our scale and drive behind it, then the Heptio story is going to be a super successful story.
I think one of the differentiators we've got here is we do acquisitions well, on the whole. I mean, there's other organizations I've been involved in previous companies were very acquisitive, but never really quite nailed it. We seem to, it's not only Nicira, but we're now through Cloud Health and everything else in between that, VelaCloud, et cetera, really, I think we seem to get it right.
Yeah, I think some of that is being very careful not to kill the very thing you acquired the company for, which is that drive, that cool idea, that ability to be able to say, we've built a team which is a certain culture associated with it. Obviously we want that to integrate and be part of VMware, but you also need to recognize that team also has a strength, something that got it to the point that where VMware said, we're interested in that. And you don't want to kill that, you want to make sure you nurture that.
And the culture bit's really true as well, because I think you could very easily say, right, we've acquired you, here's our culture, and it's like, no. Actually what you want to do is, there's some really cool stuff you're doing, can you teach us? And AirWatch is a great example of that, and some of the others where it's, okay, teach us your culture, let's add that to what we're doing to make everyone better together. And I think that's really at the heart of what we're talking about here.
I noticed that some of the leaders of Heptio tweeted last night about the VMware acquisition, but their focus was on the culture that they had built. And I found that really positive, the fact that that was what they were highlighting. It is the culture that we built got us to this place. And I think that view of culture, that'll fit really well in and work with VMware.
Well, I'm personally very proud of the culture we have here at VMware. I was asked to be a board advisor to another company, and when the guy was asking me, the CEO, I was like, well, so what do you want me to do? Is it technology-related devices? No. I want you to come and teach us about your culture at VMware and your culture of diversity and inclusion and how we can change and modernize. And I think we should be proud of that too. It's certainly an innovation we've made.
Correct, I mean, I think Sanjay said it very well this morning on stage. He said, the two driving forces behind this company have been this culture of innovation and this obsession with customers. And when you bring those two things together, that's a very powerful story.
So we're 10 years at VMworld here in Europe. I'm not going to ask you what VMworld in 10 years' time is going to look like, but what are the things you think we're going to be talking about over the next 10 years here? And 10 years is an incredibly long time if you could predict the future.
Well, if I look back 10 years and we back what we were thinking then, we weren't thinking what happened, right? So let's be clear. It's difficult to write the future, to look at the future and describe what you think is going to be there. But I do think we see certain patterns. We certainly see that more and more people seem to be consuming software and consuming their ability to deliver compute and their applications in a SaaS and as a consumption type basis, right? We see that it's well established at this point. I think that's likely to continue for a while. I think we see that people are more and more beginning to wanting to leverage new type of, I guess, unique experiences. When you go to an Amazon or somewhere that you go to buy something, you expect that website to tell you, the last time you bought stuff like this, I think you're going to like this, right? I think you're going to see that beginning to ripple into other things. You'll get into your car, probably your self-driving, semi-autonomous vehicle. You'll get into that and it will probably ask you questions, or it'll ask you a few questions the first time, then every time you get into that car, it will know about you. It will know where you want to go and your style and so on. I think we're going to see a lot of that appearing where, in some ways, consumer differentiation and uniqueness, I think, is going to get very, very real, because you have the IoT, you have the automation, you have the AI, all of which is able to deliver that.
So maybe in VMworld 2020, it won't be you and I sat here, it'll be our avatars with AI in them that sat here, and we're back home chilling out.
Yeah, I'll be sitting on the beach in California, though in Northern California, the beach is pretty cold. Let's be clear,
well,
right?
I'll be in Devon, which is just as cold in November, so I'm fine. So thanks very much. I look forward to it.
Great.